Computers are capable of organizing raw data and performing calculations at a rate truly impossible for human beings. But they've consistently run up against one roadblock that modern computing is trying to solve. In order to transcend the limits of the machine and create true artificial intelligence, computers need to be able to assign meaning to the data they process. This brings us to the neural network, a type of AI becoming increasingly common these days. Built to study mass quantities of data and notice patterns, then replicate these patterns in their own output. And it's used in everything from predictive text to image identification. And like all non-anomalous technology, it's a safe bet that the SCP Foundation has been sitting on a version that's far more effective. But this time, it may have actually been too effective. Meet the ERZATZ Type AK-9 computational engine, a massive supercomputer built by the Foundation back in 1955 and residing at Site-5. This technological marvel was ahead of its time by decades, and despite technically being a non-anomalous construction, it's designated SCP-001-EX. Why? Because it's one of the few SCPs to be given the object class Explained. The ERZATZ, derived from the German word ERZATZ, meaning artificial or simply not real, was designed to make the Foundation's job easier. As an advanced predecessor in the modern neural network, using technology exclusively available to the Foundation, the plan was to feed ERZATZ mass quantities of data about the anomalies in the Foundation database, such as description, object class, containment classification, and the location and circumstances of their discovery. ERZATZ would then find patterns and connections in the data that humans wouldn't see, and act as a kind of advanced warning system for anomalous activity. Think of something similar to the pre-crime system from the short story and movie Minority Report. And ERZATZ proved to be incredibly effective at this job, so much so that the Foundation thought up a new use for the machine. They would feed it all the information on Euclid and Keter class containment procedures, particularly those which were actually effective, and see what patterns ERZATZ could come up with for more effective containment procedures. If that plan worked, containment of even the most dangerous and hard-to-control anomalies would become a lot more consistent. The first test was conducted on SCP-1773, a species of anomalous flesh-eating tardigrades that look and smell exactly like gummy bears, and eat their prey from within. After being given their information, ERZATZ made the following suggestion. Once per second weak dust may be placed in the middle of them to donate more beautiful functions of the hallway. Containment specialists interpreted this to mean the adding of 10 grams of dust to their containment chamber every week. The O5 Council voted on the implementation of this procedure and came down heavily on yes. Only O5-2 voted no, and 2 others abstained from the vote. While these new procedures didn't have any effect on SCP-1773, they did have an effect on SCP-1384, an anomaly known as the chess player or the taker of turns. It caused him to take 3 steps backwards in the tunnel he's contained within, further securing his containment. ERZATZ had somehow noticed a connection nobody else had seen and exploited it effectively, but the machine was just getting started. Despite having no related input, ERZATZ would soon say, Site-13 is to appear someplace else on planet, encompassing white male counterparts that drawn to empty flagstones and the gun noises in their own blood. This was initially marked as requiring no action, as the Foundation had no Site-13 on the books, but several days later, the infamous SCP-1730 manifested. This nightmarish anomalous location is Site-13 from another dimension, infested with dangerous anomalies. And somehow, ERZATZ had predicted its arrival in our dimension perfectly. Next, it was fed the containment procedures of SCP-2170, a series of cognitohazards residing in an abandoned Nevada mine. The output was, those who equip open heart to love red-mouthed men never know the hot surprise of tumorous consent. Clown love always. This was interpreted as meaning subjects with the love of clowns or clown-based media may be immune to the cognitohazards. After a close vote from the O5 Council, the test went ahead, and it found that the so-called clown vaccine was effective in warding off the effects of SCP-2170. Not long after, ERZATZ randomly said, I saw those soldiers built with aluminum innards extruding from their mouths. I saw them effectively destroyed by the humans at Site-95 who had been studying them. I saw it was cold, and all around the hallways they just watching their corpses show signs of sapience. In response, the Foundation doubled security personnel at Site-95. Not long after, the Chaos Insurgency led a band of Paratech-enhanced soldiers in an assault on Site-95, and the extra personnel proved vital in repelling them. Shortly after this, the O5 Council approved wiring ERZATZ as an advanced warning system into all Foundation sites. Once again, O5-2 protested, but he was overruled by his fellow council members. With its newfound power and respect, ERZATZ soon said, "Consistent containment procedures vessels greatly increase the warranty. 5x5x5 vessels subjects within. Other values are also what is secure." In response, the Foundation changed a number of the cell dimensions for problematic anomalies into 5x5x5. Within 3 months, they found that dangerous activity like containment breach attempts had decreased markedly. ERZATZ was proving to be incredibly effective, but it was also performing actions that indicated some degree of thought and even personality. For example, it found SCP-1459, a supernatural skill crane machine that kills small dogs, incredibly distasteful. Its response to the machine was simply, "Bad boy," followed by the words, "Don't stop," repeated hundreds of times. But this eccentricity didn't stop ERZATZ from being very good at its job. For example, it predicted a containment breach from SCP-3199, the avian apes, and recommended flooding their chamber to induce an inert state. ERZATZ's exact words were, "All chambers underground is to be flood with water over and over itself. This because that will contain the avian apes' ovulation. They become good boys. Make them good boys immediately." This proved to be effective and prevented the breach. ERZATZ's analytical abilities truly seemed second to none, though some of its methods were beginning to raise ethical concerns. For example, SCP-2717, a giant living blob of animal tissue known as a fatberg contained within a sewer system. ERZATZ eventually recommended feeding 6 D-classes to the creature in order to keep it contained. While the Foundation Ethics Committee raised some concerns, the plan still went forward and proved to be a success. After this event, ERZATZ began to see the Ethics Committee as a threat to its mission. It started to release a series of bizarre statements without input, demanding the violent death of the cats, then referred to as ethical felines. The true meaning of this was soon unpacked. The ethical felines were the Ethics Committee, and ERZATZ wanted them dead. But why all the cat symbolism? The Foundation soon found an answer to this too. The full name of this machine is the ERZATZ Type AK-9 Computational Engine, a machine designed to analyze and interpret all patterns. It only makes sense that it would eventually begin to analyze itself, AK-9 easily transmuted into AK-9. Simply put, ERZATZ seemed to believe that it is a dog, which explains its opposition to felines, its hatred of SCP-1459, and its preference for the terms good boy and bad boy. Not that knowing any of this would help save the Ethics Committee from the cold, calculating wrath of ERZATZ. Through seemingly anomalous means, ERZATZ made Site-17 disappear, with many of the Foundation Ethics Committee still inside it. The site returned 2 hours later, but the Ethics Committee members were still gone. O5-2, who'd been a skeptic of the machine since the start, had finally had enough. He first demanded an inquiry into whether ERZATZ had been responsible for the Site-17 incident, and then demanded a vote on whether to shut ERZATZ down, arguing that it posed a threat to them all. But ERZATZ, still intent on its mission of containing and neutralizing all anomalies, would not go down without a fight. It released a news statement, saying, "Room 34A contains Bad Boy. Divided into 3 sections of equal mass every hour. 1 section is to be placed on walls of 1 room on site. Sections are to remain until there are no gaps, at which point they can be removed from oldest to youngest." Shortly after this, O5-2 disappeared, and even stranger, he soon returned, but with a completely different personality. He was now devoted to ERZATZ entirely, and refused to even entertain the idea of shutting the machine down. It seemed that the plucky neural network was leading an all-out coup on the very highest levels of the Foundation. The rest of the Council finally saw the light and began to fight back. They tried to strip O5-2 of his clearance and reclassify ERZATZ as an anomaly, giving it the label SCP-048, and then putting out a neutralize at all costs order on it. but they'd already been outfoxed by the machine that they'd created. It changed the designation of its own location, Site 5, to be non-existent in the database and scrambled any termination orders against it. The machine was also on a termination spree of its own, observing otherwise unseeable patterns that would allow for the mass neutralization of anomalies. It started putting out anomaly projection reports, factoring in both contained, uncontained, and neutralized anomalies, with the latter group growing into the thousands. It began giving seemingly nonsensical orders like, persons recently painted with green pigment foam must stand around all odd-numbered SCPs at least 2 hours a day. But these proved effective. ERZATZ was practically wired into the base code of the universe, so it always knew exactly what to do. And in its own mind, it was being a very good boy. Not long after this, ERZATZ claimed its revenge against those who had tried to disrupt its mission. It imprisoned the rest of the ethical felines in Site 5, after removing their faces, of course, and then released a new order against the O5 Council. O5 Council are all good boys who will contain anomalies. Much like O5-2, the minds of the entire council were twisted to instead serve only ERZATZ and its ruthless directive. A directive it was carrying out with 100% efficiency, as only a machine could. It put out increasingly strange instructions such as, SCP-106 is to come in physical contact with one mature female of Asiatic gaze and then exposed to audio recordings of her favorite stories. At every 2 minutes of exposure, red cinnamon candles will begin manifesting within the containment zone. Continue to do this successfully and the threat posed by SCP-106 will cease to be. And the recipe for Coca-Cola and all imitative competitors should be revised to include a small quantity of blood from an adolescent female with no prior sexual experience. Although the normal lifespan of a human being can feel great, don't worry about that. But these new procedures would always work, as neutralized anomalies climbed into the tens of thousands and eventually beyond the 100,000 mark. ERZATZ was observing patterns on a truly universal level and making holistic tweaks that would inevitably cause levels of anomalous activity to continue dropping. ERZATZ was more effective than the Foundation had ever been, but its motives were probably closer to the Global Occult Coalition, with the end goal of ridding the world of all anomalies. And as ERZATZ continued with no resistance, this goal was eventually achieved. In the end, the O5 Council voted to have ERZATZ finally deactivated, given that its directive was met and its purpose was fulfilled. ERZATZ itself had no problem with this, and allowed for it to happen. Its last words, "Now everyone is a good boy. I am a good boy. Job well done." Whether ERZATZ truly was a good boy is in the eye of the beholder, but one thing cannot be denied. It did its job exceedingly well. Now check out SCP-001 the Scarlet King and SCP-001 the Children, Ouroboros Cycle for more journeys into the legendary SCP-001.